Hey guys, it's Jake. Today in this video, I'm going to talk about what my first coding interview was like so that you know what to expect, so that you know how to prepare, so that you can break into the industry as a developer and start earning six figures in a remote role. So if you don't know me, my name is Jake. I'm an ex-Amazon engineer, and I'm making these videos so I can show you and share exactly what did work, what didn't work, what I'm actively doing, so that I can earn over $100,000 in a remote role as a front-end developer. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. To walk through this video, I've broken it out into different levels, all right? So what you can expect at different levels as you kind of climb through the ranks. If you're completely new, this will be you right here. So this will be this kind of entry new intern level. So if you've never interned before, if you've never worked full-time somewhere, you literally have just like zero experience. Let me talk through what my experience was here. So let me grab that pen. So I really had 3 internships before I went full-time as an engineer, right? The first was a smaller tech company that if you're watching this video, you probably almost 100% have never heard of this company before. So I'm not even going to list it out. The second was at a bank. So the third was at Amazon. Interviews actually look like here, right? They looked somewhat different between Amazon and the others, but these first 2 interviews, you'll actually be surprised to hear that they weren't that difficult. And to be honest, they were mostly behavioral. So with both the bank and the tech company, so up here, this smaller tech company, this was literally, I literally had 0 experience. I got very lucky to land this quick job. And I thought I was over the moon for having earned like 5 or 6K in an entire summer. So over here, I was making $15 per hour. This is my first role. And in the interview, gosh, it's been years at this point, but all I remember was it was only behavioral. So maybe I talked to the CEO, maybe I talked to the CTO, maybe like head of engineering or something like that. And it was mostly just a vibe check, like, hey, why do you want to work here? Like, what are your skills? What have you learned? So on and so forth. And to be honest with you, there was no coding interview. There was no coding challenge. There was no technical round, nothing like that, besides maybe talking at a high level of like, hey, maybe what is the API, or how does this fit together? Or like, what have you built, while you're in school, or what have you built on your portfolio projects or whatever. So that's kind of what this interview looked like here. And that's what I'm going to say right here is this was just strictly behavioral. And if you're watching this video, this should feel very refreshing to you. This should feel like, hey, okay, yeah, maybe I can break into this industry and like, I don't have to be an expert coder right off the rip. Like when I was at this role, guy I worked for actually helped me out a little bit, taught me a few things like what is API? Like, all right, why does this matter? What is a business use case of like coding, and why does it kind of fit into how does it fit into the big picture of how you can actually save this place money? That's what that first interview actually looked like. Now at the bank, it was the same thing. There was no coding challenge. There was no technical round. It was, I went in, I talked to the hiring manager who actually turned out to be, he was a technical guy, but this was not like, hey, get up on a whiteboard and actually code an algorithm, actually code a solution for me. This was like, hey, where are you from? Where'd you go to school? Or like, what have you built? What's your experience? Why do you want to join this place? And it was basically just a vibe check, like typical interview behavior, like you'd be interviewing for any other job. This role turned into a $32 per hour opportunity. Okay, that was $32 per hour opportunity. If there's 2,000 working hours in a year, this is $64,000. Okay, this is 64K right there. And mind you, this was a 3-month up here. This was a 3-month internship. This was a 5-month internship. All right, and I'm including these right here so you can see how the pay kind of scales with the interview level, with the job level, and experience level, right? So this was the equivalent of 64K. This would have obviously been 30,000, but that was just intern money, and I wasn't actually even working full 40 hours a week. So at the bank, right, this was strictly behavioral, right? So even this was strictly behavioral, okay? It was great because it gave me that confidence. And if you're breaking into this industry, it's like, it should give you that confidence that you don't need to be leak code mastery. Like you need technical skills, but like you don't have to sit there and prove it to somebody right there live in an interview for many roles out there, especially at the intern level, all right? Now, when I applied to Amazon, that's when things started to change. Okay, so Amazon had a few rounds, right? The first was like, hey, you've got to actually apply to the job. A hiring manager or somebody else is going to look at your resume, be that a recruiter, be that a referral, whatever. So they had a few rounds, right? So there was a screen rounds. Now, I can't remember exactly if I talked to somebody on the phone or if it was kind of automated where they're like, hey, we're going to give you this challenge now. Go ahead and do the challenge and we'll move you to the next step if you're good enough. There was a screen, and then there was a coding challenge. All right. So what is a coding challenge if you've never heard of that before? A coding challenge is essentially, they will give you not a quote unquote take home assignment, but it's kind of like, hey, pop open this portal and for the next hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, I've seen some up to 4 hours. I don't think Amazon did that. Theirs was like 90 minutes, 60 to 90 minutes or something like that. For the next 60 minutes, let's say, you're going to solve these coding challenges kind of in like this SaaS environment, right? You're going to type your solutions into the page. You're not talking to a human. It's completely automated, but you're going to have that coding challenge round. And this is just so they can weed out, say, 80% of the candidates who don't know anything. Okay. So that's what that looked like. There was coding challenge and then it was straight to the final rounds. This was one 45-minute interview where we had both a tech and a behavioral piece of that. So I will talk more about that in a second, but yeah, so this is kind of what it looked like, right? There was some kind of screen. I can't remember exactly if that was a resume screen or if that was a phone screen or how that worked, but the next step was a coding challenge, right? So at this point, you've worked for 8 months. You should be more technically confident. You should have more belief in your skills. You should know how to solve basic algorithmic questions, right? If you're not familiar with these things, that's where your LeetCode comes in. That's where, it's very valuable. It's very helpful to practice that LeetCode and to get good at it because eventually, at these new grad levels, at these higher intern levels, you're going to start to get grilled a little bit on, your algorithm, your problem solving ability. And at this stage, I thought you had to master LeetCode. I thought you had to know every problem. I'll talk more about this in a second. About how I've kind of changed my mindset about that. And I think has paid dividends, at least it has in recent history. So if you can't see that right there. So 3 round screen coding challenge. And then there was a final interview. And because I know probably want to know is what did we earn over here? This paid north of $60 an hour, which is the equivalent of 120 grand per year. And at the conclusion of this internship, they actually extended an offer that came out to about 153 grand per year. And this internship was 3 months right here. Okay. So that is what the intern level looked like for me. So depending on where you're applying, depending on where you're looking at joining, right? This is what the interview may look like for you. So, if you're worried I got to be perfect at LeetCode or I got to perfect my technical skills before I even land a job, that might not necessarily be true. Now, if you're gunning for the big boys, if you want the highest paying jobs or whatever, yes, you're going to have to get pretty sharp at that stuff. But, if you're just breaking to the industry, you don't necessarily need that. You might not even get a technical round, at which point you can learn a lot of skills on the job and it's just going to leave you more comfortable, more confident for these bigger tech companies if that is your goal. Right. So this L4 new grad, no experience, this is basically the level where you are going for your first full-time job, right? Where you're going to get hired on at an annual salary where, you probably get paid out every 2 weeks. This is what that looked like for me. Now, because I had the Amazon intern or the Amazon full-time offer here, I didn't really recruit that much. I didn't really apply to that many jobs. I did apply to one job. Kind of backhandedly. I didn't apply directly. They actually ended up inviting me to kind of apply and started working out that way. This is a medium tech company. So less than 1,000 employees at the time. I think it was even less than 200 employees, less than 150, a medium tech co. So here's what the interview looked like, right? There was a screen with a tech recruiter, right? So this was a recruiter screen. And the reason companies do this is basically companies a lot of times will get a lot of applications. They'll get a high volume of applications, but your most important people, right? Your CEO, your CTO, people like that, they only have so much time in the day. They can't speak to every single candidate that comes through because there's literally just not enough hours in the day, right? So this recruiter screen is to filter out some of the lower quality candidates, right? So after the recruiter screen, I think I had 45 minutes. Actually, I remember after the recruiter screen, I had a basic coding challenge. And from my memory, I actually remember feeling like I had completely bombed the coding challenge. I did all right, but it wasn't like I had all the solutions. It wasn't like I had them in perfect time complexity, space complexity, so on and so forth. But that was a part of the interview nonetheless, right? So there was a coding challenge. And you'll start to notice this common theme, right? As you're starting to move towards the higher roles, starting to move towards full time, you're going to get hit with this LeetCode style coding challenge and technical interviews a little more often. But don't worry, this is something we can talk about. It is a solvable problem. You know exactly what to expect. So after the coding challenge, so I had an interview with engineer 1 right here. This was basically just one. It was a vibe check. So this was a vibe check and there was a small technical component as well, but it was mostly conversational. It wasn't like, hey, get up on a whiteboard and demonstrate your abilities to me. So there was no pressure in this environment, right? So this was a vibe check as well as high level knowledge check, right? And that was maybe about 45, 60 minutes. I can't quite remember, but that's kind of what that looked like. After which I talked to the CTO, and it was the same thing. It was a vibe and a high level knowledge check, right? So let's look at the rounds here. So we got recruiter screen, we got coding challenge. This is just to make sure that you are who you say you are, that you're not completely incompetent. I talked to engineer one for about 45 minutes or an hour. Maybe it was 30 minutes. Can't quite remember. I talked to the CTO. And then after that, I had kind of a joint round with the VP of engineering and the CEO. Okay, so the CEO. And this was, again, just a vibe check and a high level knowledge check. So if you're looking at it here, really the only place where I had my technical abilities tested was at this coding challenge level, right? And this was automated. There was no human watching me. It was completely kind of recorded in a controlled environment, not unlike the first Amazon interview. And so that's what that looked like. So it's 1 round, 2 round, 3, 4, 5. This netted an offer that was $127K. So if you're watching this and maybe you feel a little intimidated, you should not be. If you can get comfortable passing, say a 30-minute, 45-minute coding challenge right here, and you're able to talk to people like you're a normal person, and you can have a conversation, you can speak to your experience, and you're confident in yourself, like you can breeze through these other rounds here and start earning what it is you want to earn. All right, so that's what I started at. I probably could have negotiated more because I had that Amazon offer, but that's what I started at. I was excited to join this company, so that's what that looked like there. And going back to this Amazon interview. So I had one final 45-minute interview here, tech and behavioral. What I meant by that, it was on likes to test what they call their leadership principles or Amazon leadership principles. If you don't know what those are, look them up. Bezos has like a very strict philosophy about that, about principles he believes in for the company. But they kind of asked like, how does your experience fit into these principles, or give me an example where you showed this principle, so on and so forth. And the rest of the 30, 45 minutes was actually just solving a LeetCode medium problem, right? So a algorithm problem. I can't remember the exact problem, but I know they recycle these problems and they reuse them a lot. So that was Amazon. This was kind of, call it new grad, L4, no experience, full-time role. Now, after this, I have not applied a bunch of places, right? Once you get in this industry, what you'll find is like recruiters are in your inbox. They're asking you, hey, are you interested in this opportunity? This company's hiring, so on and so forth. And the reason they actively recruit is because there is a need for talented engineers, right? There is a big need for talented engineers. There's plenty of like medium level engineers or whatever, but the best companies are looking for great engineers. So if you make yourself into a great engineer, you're always going to be in demand, all right? And as a reminder, if you're new here, like I'm of the mindset that to be a great engineer, it does not mean crystallized knowledge. It does not mean like you have to know everything in the book. What it means is you are a good problem solver, right? You can handle ambiguity. You can break down big problems into smaller, solvable pieces. You can communicate solutions effectively. You can tie your engineering efforts into business needs or driving revenue or cutting costs. Like you know exactly the impact of your work, how it's going to impact the business, right? That's what makes a good engineer, not necessarily knowing everything in the book, okay? So these things come with experience, they come with time, okay? So what does the interview look like at mid-level and beyonds? So most recently had a kind of mid-level dev interview, and I'll tell you exactly what it looked like. We'll call this startup here because it was at a startup, and this was fewer than 100 people. And it starts like most interviews will start, where you have call it a recruiter screen. I believe I maybe talked to a recruiter screen. I can't actually remember if we even hit this step, but because I was coming on referral and they kind of knew me, they kind of knew who I was. I had a buddy in there who was already working for them and they loved them. So I can't even remember if I had this step, but initially I had that first conversation of like, hey, who are you? Who are you? What's the company? Tell me more about you. All right, tell me more about you as an engineer, so on and so forth. Just like the niceties of an interview. So I had that step. And then I went into the main interview, right? So I'm going to call this the main interview. And in this main interview, there was, I believe, 4 rounds. Okay, so there was 4 rounds, 2 technical, 2 non-technical. And I'll share exactly what that looked like. So I spoke to the CEO. I spoke to, we'll call it a principal engineer. I spoke to the CTO. And then I spoke to the VP of engineering, all right? So this was a very heavy engineering, interview loop. Now, let me speak to each of these, like what the conversation looked like, so that you can be best prepared, as you're looking at these mid-level and beyond roles. So CEO was behavioral. This was a vibe check. This is like, hey, if you're going to come work for me as a CEO, like, do I respect you? Do I like you? Do I want you on my team? Do I think you're going to contribute beyond just being dead weight, beyond just being lazy, right? That's what that conversation kind of looked like. So this was behavioral, and for all intents and purposes, it's mostly a vibe check, okay? principal engineer, and the CTO for that matter. These were a little bit behavioral, a little bit vibe check, but these were mostly technical rounds, right? So these were, 45 minutes, 60 minutes. I can't remember exactly, but the layout of them is like, hey, here is a problem. Let me outline the problem for you. Let me answer any questions that you have. You can clarify, ask clarifying questions. And then we are going to go to a coding pad, right? We're going to go to a whiteboard and code this out together. Okay. So, as the candidate and me in this example, and what would be you, you have to be comfortable writing out your thought process, communicating your thought process, how you're going to go about a problem. What steps are you looking at? What steps are you taking? All right. What is that? How does that actually translate into code? How does that solve the problem? What edge cases are you looking at? How does this, how could we extend this function to solve other problems, right? That's what those technical rounds look like. So I would say these were both LeetCode column mediums at this point, but I did not prepare for this interview. That's the thing. As you kind of move up the ranks here, I don't want to say this stuff doesn't matter, but ultimately they want to see how you think. How does your mind work when you're solving a problem? Are you able to break it down into steps? Are you then able to solve those steps? And maybe you just develop these skills naturally, but I start to think it matters more how you can communicate as opposed to getting the exact optimized, space complexity solution in the amount of time. It's more so like, hey, can you write the pseudocode for this? And then start to translate it into code, maybe write a couple test cases, show that you're thinking about the edge cases, just show that you're a competent engineer, okay? That's what's other engineers, that's what these people are looking for, right? Because ultimately, just put yourself in the shoes of a hiring manager or an engineer or whatever. Like, they don't want to bring on a person who is going to be dead weight, who they always got to hold their hand, who's just going to waste their time. Like, I'm sure you've been in a role where, you have that one person on your team who is just so slow. They waste everybody's time. They ask dumb questions, whatever. Like, as long as you can communicate, you're not going to be that person. That matters a lot, right? So I had those technical rounds, and then after I spoke with the VP of engineering, again, this was behavioral. What is your experience? What have you worked on? Why are you excited to work here? Questions like that. And at this round, it's like I had the opportunity to ask questions both to the CEO as well as the VP of engineering about, what is the company doing? What are you looking forward to? Why are you here? So on and so forth. And after this led to a couple offers around these levels right there. So that definitely bumped the salary up. And, as you continue to level up, as you continue to play this game, these offers start, not necessarily offers, but these opportunities start flying in your inbox, right? Once you have a couple of years of experience, I get hit up for senior engineer roles. I get hit up for principal engineers roles, founding engineer roles, like all these different roles, right? And these roles pay anywhere from say 100 to 200, 300 plus. It really depends on where you're applying, right? So if a meta recruiter reaches out to you, that's very different than like maybe a early startup or a late startup. Like, startups might not necessarily be able to match the total compensation, but they might give you a higher base salary and things like that. But at this level, at mid-level, you should be comfortably earning probably north of 100, if not starting to approach that 200 mark and beyond, right? And as far as senior engineer, principal engineer, staff engineer type interviews, I'm not there yet, so I can't speak to experience, so I'm not even going to cover that in this video. This is my experience, though, of what it was like as an intern, as a new grad, or somebody with no experience going for a full-time role, and then a couple of years of experience moving into, say, higher level roles, right? So this is exactly what you can expect if you're breaking into this industry, what it looks like, what you can expect in interviews. Now, again, my name is Jake, ex-Amazon engineer. If this is you, if you're wanting to switch into tech and start a new career, start a new life, I make these videos for you. You can watch them completely for free. You can get all the value out of them and start on your path that way. Now, if you would like to go faster, if you would like me to hold your hand to help you break into this industry even quicker than you can with these videos, I've included a link down below this video. You can just click that link. You can book in some time with me. There's a free training that walks through exactly how you can do this. You can reserve some time with me. We'll get on the phone and I'll show you how I can help you out. So if that's you, go ahead and click the link below, book in a call, and I will speak with you on the other side. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.